What's going on, everyone? We are back with another edition of Trojan Dash, our first ever crossover Dash Sports TV episode in Trojan Dash history. I'm your boy Nathan Ackman. Today I am joined by Sun Devil Dash co-host Wills Rice from Arizona State. Wills, how you doing?
Nathan, I'm doing great. As of right now, the season's still 0-0, so I'm still filled with hope, and I'm still thinking the Sun Devils could pull something out, pretty miraculous this season. But that's the great thing about football is you start off everyone 0-0, and it's going to be a good game week one. I'm excited, even though it could be ugly for the Sun Devils, could not be. I'm just excited football's back, man.
Yeah, I've been saying ever since the Pac-12 announced that it was indeed coming back that I will believe it when I finally see it. And today/yesterday, Pac-12 games for this weekend are dropping like flies. We are very close to the game because it is at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Going to have to wake up early for that one. But let's just assume for now that this game actually takes place. I think the biggest storyline that many are anticipating from this matchup is going to be Kedon Slovis and Jaden Daniels. Wills, what do you expect to see out of this matchup?
I mean, it's so difficult. Josh and I have talked about this, my other Devil Dash co-host, that Daniels is such an interesting character because you look at his stats from last year, they were nowhere close to Kedon Slovis's, but the 2 interceptions are what really made him stand out. He didn't turn the ball over. And, as a freshman, you weren't really looking for him to be, that Heisman contender. We don't run the air raid, anything like that. But, what can we expect from him? We don't really have those playmakers anymore, so we're kind of relying on him to go out and maybe get us 30 touchdowns this year. And you know what? That might mean he turns the ball over, 8, 9, 10 times this year. But if he's going to get 30, 35 touchdowns and he turns it over 10 times, I think that's something we can take. And the question that I have is, Kedon Slovis is going to get his yards and his touchdowns. Is he going to turn the ball over? I think that's going to be the difference in the game. Is if he throws those interceptions that ASU is. Daniels isn't really a 300-yard per game type guy. He might have some big plays, but expect probably 200 yards, 220 yards passing, and maybe another 50 yards rushing that are big yards rushing. But is Kedon Slovis going to throw the interceptions? That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, when I judge quarterbacks, I tend to look a lot at that picks number. Right? I don't like when guys turn the ball over. I mean, I think that's the worst thing you can possibly do as a passer, right? So I think. Kedon Slovis obviously struggled with that at points last year. It wasn't like an astronomically high figure, but still more than you want to take. I mean, and 3 of those came from one game against BYU. So, take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But that is still a question that remains to be seen. I do want to shout out Reagan Griffin Jr., former Dash Sports Coach and Dash. Wills versus Nathan, the beef is real. You know that it is real. But I think going back to this game, right, I think where it's going to be won or lost is not actually through the air, because that Kedon Slovis, as you said, is going to get his yards. I could see him throwing for honestly 400. Yeah. I could see Jaden Daniels throwing for 300, 350 as well. But I think that what's going to make all the difference in the world in this game is going to be, can USC contain Jaden Daniels on the ground? Because USC has struggled with mobile quarterbacks in the last few years, and transition to their new 3-4 defensive scheme. It's going to be a lot on the linebackers group that it doesn't look bad by any stretch, but it certainly hasn't been, talked about as one of USC's strongest position groups this year. Can that group contain him? Are they going to be able to, I think the defensive line can get a decent amount of pressure on him, but if he evades that pocket and he starts, scrambling for 11, 12, 13 yards, every time he, passes the line of scrimmage, I mean, that's going to be a tough thing for USC to overcome, because then you have Jaden. He's obviously effective through the air, right? He's a great passer, probably not to Kedon Slovis' level, but if you couple that with a scrambling quarterback who's going to kill you for 100 yards on the ground, I mean, that's going to be tough for this team to have to.
And one thing, kind of not to reassure you, but I think a lot of people overlook Jaden Daniels' running ability. He is very athletic, but one thing I think that makes this guy spectacular is that he does not really look to run at all. It's really, he's great in the pocket and he takes sacks, but he's not a quick to run guy, and that's why he never really has huge gains, but the gains that he makes, they're back-breaking plays. They're the 3rd and 11s, and those are the ones that keep the drive goings that, then you score a touchdown 5 plays later, and it doesn't show up on the stat sheet as a Jaden Daniels touchdown, but those 11 yards were bigger than any 11 yards in the game, for the Sun Devils to that point. And I think that's where on the ground game, if USC, wants to stop his effectiveness, you see it a lot. And, as a Cardinals fan here in Arizona, Kyler Murray is when his feet are running, his passing game's on. But when you stop those feet and, you kind of stagger them in the pocket a little bit, they get in their own head. And, especially for kids, these kids are both 19 years old. They're 20 years old, these quarterbacks. So, they both had one season and they still have a lot to prove, both of them. So it's going to be really interesting to see what both defenses throw at each other for after this huge long hiatus of college football, and what teams show up for both sides.
Yeah, and I want to shout out our man Emil Jones in the chat as well, saying the weather is going to be an important factor in this game. I agree. I think the time is going to make a huge difference as well. I mean, I'm going to have trouble getting up at 7 a.m. to cover this game, to sit on my chair and watch. So I can't imagine what playing a college football game at 9 a.m. is going to be like. I'm sure these guys can handle it just fine. But I also think, you kind of touched on this as well, right? If Jane Daniels doesn't look to run on every single play, like he trusts his arm enough to get the job done through the air. Does Arizona State, do you think they have the weapons to sort of be able to function in that type of offense? I mean, they lost some guys from last year. Do you think that they're going to be able to overcome that? Because we've seen SC's wide out group, and we know that group is loaded. So, for SC, I could see three different guys, receiving for 100 yards this game. Do you think that ASU has that offensive firepower to be able to get that job done through the air?
I just want to address Cody's comment first, talking about Washington State fans know about Jane Daniels' running capability. Cody, that was one of my favorite runs of the year last year when Jane Daniels scored on you guys, and he actually did he got hit in midair and did a helicopter turn and scored with 17 seconds left or something to beat you guys. So thanks for reminding me. That gets me even more pumped for tomorrow's game, actually. But you know what, Nathan? It's a great question. Josh and I have been talking about this every week leading up to this. Frank Darby is the only receiver on ASU with more than 10 Division I catches. So, obviously that's a huge red flag. But you look at the talent that ASU brought in. They brought in a Johnny Wilson who's 6'6", 230 pounds from California. He was originally committed to Oregon and then flopped here. He flopped to Arizona State. And then we have Chad Ochocinco's son coming in, who is a 3-star who, you don't know what you're going to get with him, but you're getting a big name. And then we have another 3-star coming in. So these are 3 guys that are going to get a lot of playing time right off the jump. And, outside of Frank Darby, our running back and those 3 receivers are all brand new. So, Jane Daniels, a few people on the offensive line, and Frank Darby, those are the only faces that, Sun Devil fans are going to be familiar with. So to answer your question, we really don't know. I think that's why this game, we're going to talk about the spread later, but, why it's a little bit bigger is because of so much unknown with this Sun Devil team.
Yeah, I think it might call into question your take from a couple of about USC no longer being wide receiver university because that is now Arizona State. Would you like to take that back at all before Saturday's matchup?
Okay, I do not want to take that back because obviously ASU is going to win. I believe that. And I'll end this right here. I want to preface what I meant by that is that USC has not produced a great wide receiver in the NFL, and Juju Smith this year is just. It's more like Doo-Doo Smith at this point. I don't know, but.
Ooh. All right, we got a comment in the chat from your co-host. He says, Sun Devils plus 10. And that's a topic that we should talk about because this spread, I think this game's going to be close, right? The spread's 10.5 points. What do you think about that? SC is favored by 10.5 points. What do you think about that spread? Because I would say at this point, I'm relatively confident that SC is going to win. I'm probably 65% confident in that, which isn't that high, I guess. But I don't think it's going to be an 11-plus point game. So why do you think that spread is so big? And do you think there's any chance that SC covers that spread?
I could see this game going both ways. I think ASU wins in a close game. I think if it's a close game, that Herm Edwards is going to outcoach Clay Helton. And I think he's shown that not just to Clay Helton, but to so many other coaches in the Pac-12 that he'll outcoach you in a close game down the stretch. Or I see USC covering the spread pretty easily. Because of the unknown, like I just said, you don't know what offense is going to show up. But sports, we both love sports. Storylines play a difference. They make a difference in games. Single game, whether it's a rivalry game, whatever it is. And I think Jane Daniels not playing this last year is going to be, a chip on his shoulder that this is our year to go win this. They're saying Keaton's a better quarterback than I am. I'm going to go out and prove on this stage, first game of the season, I'm going to win. I think that's something to keep an eye on. And then something I was talking to on our show last week about is the storyline of Jack Jones returning to the Coliseum. I expect him to have a big game. He was recruited by USC, went to USC, and then now obviously is at ASU. I think he could get Amon-Ra St. Brown a lot of the day. Him and Chase Lucas could be switching it up. And, corner is going to be a point of strongness for Arizona State this year is going to be corners. So I think that's a storyline to watch out on. And, if those matchups, the Eden Slovis, how well he does in the corners versus USC's wide receivers, I think if you look at those stats at the end of the day, you can tell where the spread's going to be without even looking at the score.
Yeah, so my thing about this game, this is something I've been talking about for several weeks now, is that USC has started slow each of the last 4 seasons, whether that's taking an absolute thrashing to Alabama or whether it's beating subpar teams like Central Michigan or UNLV or Fresno State by not as much as they should have beat them. I wonder if that's going to be another concern heading into this game. And even if it's not like a full game kind of thing, even if it's just they come out, maybe the first half they struggle, they're down 4 going into halftime, and then all of a sudden they're playing from behind against. That the head coaching matchup is probably Arizona State gets the nod there. So if it comes down to that close game where USC is trying to have to play from behind going into the fourth quarter and the last couple possessions, I think it's going to be tough for SC to overcome that. So that's one of the things that has me really thinking that, I don't know, 11 points seems like kind of a lot. I also think that there's a chance that this year that doesn't happen, and this year USC doesn't start off slow. Todd Orlando, all the new coaches come in and they sort of have this team prepared to hit the ground running, right? And they come out of the gates just firing on every aspect of the game, and they just come out hot. And I think if that happens, USC's talent probably takes them to a pretty significant victory. The thing is, I don't know if that's going to happen, and I don't think that USC's talent. They're going to have to play a great game and start off really fast in order to cover that spread. I think because Arizona State's talented. Like, they're a good team. They're a well-coached team, and I think they have. Well, if Arizona State wins this game, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. I would say, I would guess right now, if I had to put my money on it, that USC wins. But I don't know. We'll see. It'll be a great game.
Let me tell you this. The reason I don't think USC covers the spread is, it's different when you play the best of the best if you're playing those great teams. And I'm not saying USC isn't, but they're definitely not in the same conversation as, some of the top 10 schools. But Herm Edwards doesn't get blown out. He doesn't get blown out in games. And it's really tough because he runs the ball, and it's sometimes frustrating because, you'll be down 10 points in, early in the third quarter on a 3rd and 10. And you'll see Herm Edwards run the ball and, for 8 yards and, get a little more field back for a punt. And sometimes that can be really irritating. But, for spread-wise, if we're talking about Vegas, I really think the spread's going to be close. And let me tell you this, Nathan, with ASU, I said it could go both ways. This team is mightily talented. When they're clicking, I think that this could be, have the potential for a fantastic, one of the best games of the weekend. When things aren't clicking, there's a lot of freshmen and not a lot of leadership here. So if USC does get out to this early lead that, you think they could, hot start, beware. I would be very cautious if I were ASU because you do not want to be down low. And, I think they have 4 of their 6 players are new captains this year. So, not a lot of leadership, veteran leadership, a lot of young players. So something to keep an eye on. If I was ASU, be very, very worried about getting down early and, try to put USC down early. Obviously, that's the goal. Obviously, that's the goal. But
yeah. That said, though, we saw this happen last year. Right? USC came out of the gate flying. Eden Slovis threw for, I want to say, 297 passes. Just absurd. And USC wins that game 31-6 because ASU outscored them something like 19-3. I should have done that math better in my head. But again, USC. This Arizona State team to me is just really cool. Whether that's coaching staff, whether that's players, they have all the makings of the kind of team that maybe fall down early, maybe fall down by 14, 20 points early, and even if they don't come all the way back, they at least make this a close game. So that's one of the reasons why I don't see this game being more than 11 points.
And I think the reason I said it earlier is that there is just so much unknown. Like if you're a college sports fan, I know we watch a lot of Pac-12. We know a lot about the Pac-12 teams, but just for the average fan, it's like, name me 2 players on ASU or, out on USC, outside of those guys, I mean, USC definitely, the average fan has a lot more on, but outside of Jaden Daniels, I don't think an average fan could name anyone on ASU. And only has something to do with where the money is being bet and why the line is 11. I think that definitely has something to do with it. But
yeah, and maybe the 9 a.m. kickoff and the 12 o'clock Eastern time is going to sort of heighten that Pac-12 attention, because I think it's going to be a great game. I mean, there were two games going into this opening weekend that I sort of had my eye on. Obviously, this one, and then Washington Cal, right? Yeah, Washington Cal. And that game is not happening, of course. So was it Washington Cal? It was Washington.
Yeah, it was Washington Cal and Utah, Arizona.
And Utah, Arizona. Yeah. So I mean, now this is really the only Pac-12 game that I think should be that interesting. I mean, I guess UCLA Colorado might be a close game. But
who's Stanford playing again? Is it Oregon State? No.
Oregon.
Oh, that Oregon, Stanford, Oregon. That
Oregon.
Decent.
It's good. But I think this will by far be the most entertaining game.
Absolutely.
On that topic, whoever covers the spread, somebody's going to win this game. And we've sort of talked about the landscape around the Pac-12 this year. But I want to pose a question to you, right? Does the loser of this game have a chance to bounce back and win the Pac-12 South?
Well, you and I were talking about this before, and it literally right as the Utah-Arizona game got canceled, I was saying, I think if USC loses this game, they have a chance, and ASU doesn't. If ASU loses, they do not. And I say that because ASU struggled historically so much with in that defense that if you can't score with USC, I don't think you're going to score on Utah. And nothing against USC's defense, but Utah's defense just for ASU is always a different breed for some reason. That being said, I think USC always matches up well against Utah. It's just one of those things, at least in my recent memory of, players and matchups. But I think USC wins. If USC wins, they win the Pac-12 South pretty easily. I think they are a better team than ASU and Utah. And I think ASU and Utah might beat each other up and beat some other teams up. But it's so hard to answer that question now that how many games is Utah going to play? Are they going to play 5? Are they going to play 6? Are they going to play 7? Like, are they going to make up that game on the back end? You just don't know. So, I mean, the fact that we're one of those games that's still happening is definitely a good thing. But I don't know who USC has next week, but ASU has Cal, and that's one of the teams, whose game got canceled this week. So it's really going to be head scratching to see who plays who.
Yeah, and that's my other thing too, because obviously things are looking a lot different now for the Cal situation. But when the schedule originally came out in the way that it's construed now, USC's crossover game is Washington State. Arizona State's crossover game is Cal. Yeah. Right? Other than Arizona State and Utah, I don't see any game that USC could really possibly lose. I mean, that might come back to bite me if USC loses some fluke to Colorado or UCLA or something like that. Oh, I guess UCLA is bad. Never really know, but whatever. And I think Arizona State Cal is a game that Cal could totally win. So I think that if SC comes out, they start slow this year, they lose, I think there's still a very decent chance that USC runs the table in the rest of the regular season. Arizona State falls to Utah and Cal, and then USC with one loss makes the Pac-12 championship game. Now, of course, the recent situations have us wondering, how are they even going to do the standings? I mean, we can talk about the Pac-12 and the way that they built their schedule with no flexibility. I don't know why they did that, by the way. Their original schedule back in August, they had 2 or 3 makeup dates where you could, replay games that might have to get canceled because of COVID, and now they have none of that. So I don't know how.
Larry Scott.
Yeah, exactly. 2 words, Larry Scott. I don't know how Washington and Cal and Utah and Arizona are going to make those games up. So, I mean, are they going to go by number of wins, number of losses, winning percentage in the regular season? I mean, I don't know how they're going to do this, but that aside, I guess, I just think that this is a situation where I really see Arizona State and USC being the top 2 contenders for the Pac-12 South.
Absolutely.
This year. And the Utah fans are not going to like that, but losing Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss, and having a defense that toward the end of the season last year kind of started to show that maybe it wasn't quite as dominant as people thought. I don't know if I really think Utah is as good as either of these 2 schools. That might also bite me in the ass, but I mean, we'll have to see about that, I guess. So, I think that this game probably going to determine the Pac-12 South because there's no other team that I really could see making a huge push for that. Certainly no other team that I could see winning the Pac-12. So this game's probably going to decide that, but I think that this is more of a must-win. Okay, in a 6-game season, it's a must-win for both teams because the season's short, and both these teams have bigger aspirations as far as bowl game goes, even if they don't win the championship, or even if they do to make the college football playoff, whatever. But in terms of like what they could lose and what they have at stake here, this is probably more of a quote unquote must-win game for them.
Absolutely. And I think something that actually someone asked in a question, has either program had more time to prep? I think that's something that we haven't gotten into that could play, obviously, when you step out in the field, everything's different, but California hasn't been able to practice, at the beginning of this COVID, kind of everything that brought the Pac-12 back up and running. Fill me in on that one. What do you think? How much is that going to affect USC? They missed a few practices that ASU had the opportunity to. I don't even think it was full pads, but every practice is valuable. Fill me in. Do you think that's going to play a difference?
Yeah. So the thing that sticks out to me is that USC's defensive coaching staff is just overhauled. I mean, new defensive coordinator, new, special teams coach, new cornerbacks coach, new pretty much everything. Safety, everything is just new this year, right? So, and then spring ball got canceled. Fall camp was short, and it was sort of like stop and start, kind of awkward kind of thing. And they've had not a lot of time to implement these new defensive schemes. I mean, I know that the schedule is starting 2 or 3 months later than it was originally, way back in, alternate universe supposed to start. But it's been tough to have time to implement that as far as, actual practice time. And then, Los Angeles had limits on the cohorts that could practice together at the same time, outdoors, whatever. So, I mean, that is something that, again, I could see factoring into SC starting off this thing slow. And Arizona State, I mean, is facing some of the same problems, probably not to the same degree, right? So I think that if in terms of X's and O's and having all the timing down, having everything straight in week 1, I think that's something that could definitely bite USC. And I think, we think that they've found a way around some of the, practice restrictions to watch film, study these things on the whiteboards, whatever, and try to get all these schemes down. But in the end, you don't really know until you play. And not only do you know until you play it on the field, you don't know until you play against, opponents that aren't your own team's offense. So this is something that it's going to be totally new for USC. I could see them starting slow. I could see, a 5-play touchdown drive out of Arizona State to open the game. So, and all of a sudden they're down 7-0, and you just never know.
Well, and the reason that gives me a little bit of hope is because, like I said, ASU has the 3 freshman wide receivers and this new running back. So, anytime we can get a few more practices up on the next guy, it's going to be a help to our advantage. So especially with, maybe Utah, but arguably the only team that's substantially definitely ahead of the curve on ASU on their schedule. So, any advantages we can take over them, I think getting you guys week 1 is a huge advantage for us. So you guys don't really get the steam rolling a little bit. I think that's something that we didn't talk about, that could be a difference maker. All just kind of little things that go along with, the 9 a.m. kickoff. And I don't know if you heard this, ASU's team meal is at 4:45 tomorrow morning. So we're almost 12 hours out from ASU's team meal now.
It's going to be a totally new environment. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here because I feel like you've avoided the elephant in the room. We've talked about what might happen. What do you think does happen? Who wins this game and by how much?
Okay. I said my prediction was that ASU wins this game. I know I'm a homer a little bit. I think the game's going to be a lot better than people think. I really don't think it's going to be as high scoring as everyone thinks. I think Bovis is going to turn the ball over, and I think ASU is going to struggle to move it a little bit in the first half. If I had to give a score prediction, I know this is still not low scoring, but I say 31-28, which is not really, a super high scoring game, but I think there's going to be some points, but not really the fireworks that everyone's expecting. I think ASU wins 31-28.
I'm actually going to raise that point total a little bit. I've got USC 35, Arizona State 31. I see this playing out in somewhat similar fashion to last season, maybe even a little bit more on the offensive side. Unfortunately, we are out of time here. Thank you so much for watching this crossover episode, everybody. As you all know by now, of course, we publish columns exclusively with Sports Pac-12. You can follow them on Twitter at Sports Pac-12 or visit their website, sportspac12.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Dashboards TV, and find us on the internet and all of our shows and fun clips at dashboards.tv. Wills, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathan.
For this crossover episode today. We'll see what happens. Should be a fun one tomorrow.
Go Devils.